Talking about first-time home buyers.
We're talking about first-time home buyers, and I'm going to go out on a limb to say in the 17 years that I've been doing mortgage lending as a mortgage broker, now is the best possible time for a first-time home buyer to buy a home.
Wow, why is that controversial?
Because the rates are high, and they can probably qualify for less now than they could have before.
Okay.
Why is it the best time?
Yeah, you tell me.
One, the people that are qualifying at a higher rate than it really has been the last several years.
Yeah.
For those people who do end up buying a home, Todd,
Yeah.
they are going to be prepared for the future.
Right.
And when the rates go down, if they're smart,
Yeah.
and if they're a client of ours, maybe a client of somebody else's too, who knows, they will then do a payment increase and keep their payments at where they were when they first started. Mm-hmm. Those borrowers will then pay down their mortgages much, much faster than their peers did when they bought their home. They were probably just affording what they could afford. Mm-hmm. So I think those borrowers are going to be better suited, better educated.
Yeah.
And if they are smart, when the rates go down in the future, they will pay off their mortgages much, much faster than their cohorts that have bought homes the last, few years.
Yeah. Just simply because if they are able to buy in this environment, then they're inherently more responsible?
I would say they're probably more responsible,
Yeah.
and they can pay off their mortgages faster, and they're probably qualifying for a much smaller mortgage than they might have a couple years ago.
Right.
So I think in terms of the level of responsibility, I think, these borrowers are going to be in better shape. The other thing, and the other elephant in the room, is maybe the prices will actually be a little bit less, right? The average home price here in Halifax has gone down. Is the price of real estate down? I don't know. I don't think so. I think that maybe in some cases, people are not bidding, $100,000 plus over the listing price. And I think in some cases, there's not 20 offers on a property.
Yeah.
And that's okay. Yeah. I think that was very normal in some areas of Ontario. That was the norm. You went in and there was tons and tons of offers, and it was always way, way over. And it just, it was a survival of the fittest, and whoever could basically pay the most. I think now there certainly are some more price reductions. I think sellers are willing to work with buyers on conditions. Mm-hmm. And I think some real estate is selling for at the asking price or below the asking price. So I think things are renormalizing a little bit. The issue is, and Chris said this earlier in our show, there's not enough inventory, and there's more demand than there is supply.
Yeah.
So that's one thing to be taken, really into consideration.
Yeah. So what about on the supply side of things? Is there supply in the Halifax market that suits first-time home buyers? Because that's been a real challenge for first-time home buyers.
And I think the average house price is somewhere, around that $500,000 mark. Yeah. That's still a tough price point for a first-time home buyer.
It is,
I will be honest with you.
Yeah.
The interesting thing about Nova Scotia is the further you go out of the core, the lower the prices are.
Yeah.
And it's really not that far.
Right.
I think that, the way that we've worked has changed too. Obviously more people are back to the office, but there still are a lot of people that work from home.
And that trend's probably going to stay the same.
In rural areas here in Nova Scotia, there's a lot of rural areas that we have really good internet.
Yeah.
There's some rural areas that we have really bad internet.
Yeah.
So, obviously these are things that you need to do about do with your research.
Yeah.
Figure out what you can afford. And, I think that if you are a first-time home buyer that's buying now, you will likely be in better shape in the long run.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, these are things that people need to be considering. You need to consider
a lot of people
amenities.
Are scared.
And that's right. Yeah.
You have to consider all these things when you're buying a home. But
so you're saying scared. How so? What do you mean?
I think consumers are scared because they think prices are kind of at all-time highs and rates are at all-time highs.
Right.
The rates have been higher.
Yeah.
When I started 17 years ago, a 5-year fixed rate was 6.25. We've all heard about the rates that were in the 80s, at 13%, 19%, whatever. We're not going to get there.
No.
I think that can we handle a little bit more in increases? I think we can, and I think they will go up a little bit more. But I think they're going to go up, maybe 1.25% more, and then we're going to start to see things soften. Mm-hmm. So if you're a first-time home buyer today, I would still recommend a variable rate. if you can stomach some more increases over the next, 12 to 18 months, and then keep your payment where it was.
Yeah.
As the prime rate goes down, do a payment increase. Pay off your mortgage faster. You will thank me in a year or 2 years or 3 years. You're going to be like, you know what? This is the best advice I think I've ever received.
Yeah.
And I can tell you, I don't think anyone else is saying now is the best time for a first-time homebuyer to buy. But these first-time homebuyers are going to be set up for success.
Yeah, absolutely. Down payment. This is obviously a challenge for down payments. You're seeing a lot of in some situations, many situations, probably gifts for down payments.
Yeah,
how's that work?
It's very, very common to see a gifted down payment or a portion of the down payment to be gifted. So typically, a gift needs to be from a direct family member, so mother, father, brother, sister.
Yeah.
And we're actually seeing some very large family gifts to the tune of 6 figures plus. And the reason that we're seeing the gifts at that level is really because to qualify, the borrower in some cases needs to put down 20%. And maybe the first-time home buyer doesn't have that amount of savings. But the parents are like, if this kid doesn't buy now, it may be a buy never type situation if the values continue to go up.
Right.
So I think parents are really helping out with the down payment. Some parents are choosing to do co-signing.
Yeah.
I think, from what I see here in my purview, we definitely see more gifts and less co-signing. And I'm not saying that co-signing is absolutely the worst, most terrible idea ever. I'm not saying that. It's just, I think some parents, if they do have the ability to write a check, they would rather write a check and then be done and not have the financial liability.
Yeah, for sure. So, look, first-time home buyers, don't be intimidated, right? And get out and see a mortgage advisor. You just don't know what can be done, right?
I think seeking the advice of an unbiased mortgage professional is definitely the way to start.
Yeah.
Figure out what you can afford.
Right.
And once you know what you can afford, then you really need to work with a licensed real estate professional in your area that lives and works in the area. Right. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Depending on where you're buying and in what city, in what province, it's really good to have someone who is an expert in that area that you want to live because, they know things that are happening. They know where the good areas are. They maybe know about listings before they even come up. So I think, seeking that advice is really important. And I think negotiating, I think maybe you don't need to buy the first house you look at. And, when I first started 17 years ago, first-time home buyers were buying starter homes.
Right.
It is okay to buy a house that doesn't check all your boxes.
Yeah.
Or a condo or whatever. It's about maybe getting into the market, paying down your mortgage, and hopefully the value of the real estate will go up and you can build some equity. And then maybe you can get your dream home. Yeah. The first home doesn't need to be the forever home.
No.
And I think that's where the trend has changed a little bit. My parents owned 3 homes in their life. And you know what? That's kind of a lot for people in the 70s and 80s.
Of that era.
Yeah, of that era.
Yeah.
They had one house in Vancouver, and they bought another house in Nova Scotia, and then they have the house that they're in now. So, I think that people's needs and wants have changed, but I think the focus on needs versus wants, I think, will be really important, I think, for the rest of the year and going into 2023.
Okay, quickly, how do people get a hold of you?
Check us out online at teamclinton.ca/radio. All kinds of great information on there. There's links to our social media, hundreds of blog posts. We'd love to be in touch.